well with state and higher pathway programs. So that's me.
I'm Guy, and I'm the Community Development Manager with Inspire, and I'm out and about doing lots of the coaching and coach education. And I've come through the Netball Victoria pathways through coaching in VNL and state teams programs, as well as grassroots and that junior netball, and have been lucky enough to play for the Victorian and Australian men's team as well. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Before we go any further, we are recording tonight. So we were just saying earlier that if you don't feel comfortable having your video on, that is fine. We would love you to have your video on because we love interacting with people and are missing that at the moment. So, but that's totally up to you. I know a lot of you are muted as well, which is fine. We might get an opportunity to kind of have a few conversations or answer some questions throughout tonight's session. So we might unmute you then, but yeah, it's probably best to stay muted for the moment so that everyone can hear really well. So I thought before we would get into the nitty-gritty of under 11s, we just kind of give you a bit of a brief rundown of how tonight came about, and before we get into the specifics of it, just why this session has been created and hopefully what you're going to get out of it. So over the last 4 or 5 weeks with coronavirus impacting a lot of netball, we delivered some online coaches workshops that really focused on the training environment, and then out of that we decided to run this session, which we felt would hopefully give everyone a really good insight into under 11s or whatever age group we were going to present on. And I guess in an hour's time slot, it's pretty difficult to cover millions of different things, but we thought we'd just try and really give you the most important hints and tips when it comes to this age group. And I might even now swing into the PowerPoint presentation that we're going to refer to, which will hopefully make it easier as we're working through tonight's session. Sorry, we're bringing it up, so it's about to hopefully hit our screens. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that now. Does someone mind just...
Say thumbs up.
Oh, but can we see that?
Yeah,
oh, you can see that? Great, awesome. Just wanted to check. So obviously under 11 age specific tips and hints, and we're going to fire off into the first page. So this is what we're going to cover tonight as we run through. So the first thing we're going to look at is program planning. So looking at the core skills to develop and just general program planning, especially when you're working with this under 11 age group. Then we're going to look at developing an effective training session, and that's more an overview of the things to consider when you're planning a training session. Unfortunately tonight we definitely won't have time to actually go through I guess the structure and the specific details around a training session, but we did want to touch on it and give you some tips around that. Matchday coaching, so again just a bit more of an overview around how you can manage rotations and looking at individual skills within your match day, and also just looking at how you can manage and structure your coaching on match day as well. And then we'll just finish off with some tips for engaging under 11s, as a lot of you put that in the question part around how to engage under 11 players, which we know is also really challenging. And before we go any further, we just thought it was pretty important to let you know as well that a few of you asked around specific skills and strategies, which isn't part of tonight. This is an overview, and we just wanted to ensure that everyone knew that. We are happy to have, some questions at the end, but there's so many skills and strategies in the game of netball, it's pretty difficult for us to be able to deliver on those in this type of session. So we can talk a little bit more about workshops and that we do around some of the skills that you asked around, but yeah, with basically what you can see now is what we're going to cover in the next 45 minutes, an hour. So next slide.
All right, so we thought there were quite a few questions that came through around what are the skills that we should be, looking at developing within an under 11 age group. And there's a really great resource that is available around what the skills are and the progressions that we can kind of work towards. So I might get Greg to maybe just pop out of this screen, and we'll head into our the Netball Australia framework page. So there will be a little link for you to go into that screen.
That's up. For some reason, it's not coming up on your TV though.
Okay. So we might just get that to turn around. So we'll just scroll through. There's got a bit of background information into how that framework was developed through Netball Australia. And you'll see there that we're then scrolling down through to all of the different skills that are involved in netball. So there's the movement skills, ball skills, attacking, defence, and then there's also the area-specific goaling and some strategy skills for all the different age groups. So foundation, which is kind of like your 11 and under, so Net Set Go and under 11s. And then development, which is looking at 13 and under, intermediate, which is looking at your 15 and under age group, and so on and so forth. So it's a really great resource just to be able to have a look and go, okay, what are the skills that as a coach, if I'm coaching an under 11 team, that I should be trying to really focus on to develop a well-rounded athlete. And look, I know some players might be able to perform that skill at a really high level. They might have done quite a number of years of Net Set Go and then into under 11, so they've got a good base already. And then there might be some that are brand new to netball that might not be able to complete those or perform those skills at that same level. So there's different things to be aware of within that. What we have then done, so that's a great resource for you to look at. I have also used this resource. We have got a little project that's on the plans coming forward, where we are actually going to provide a resource around what a program plan will look like. So Greg's just shared this Excel spreadsheet, and I've kind of mapped out what a program will look like. So you can see down the left-hand side there all the skills. And I've also broken up how I would kind of structure my program, and I've kind of based it off a school term, so probably about 10 weeks. Because we know that most kind of associations would tend to break over the school holiday. So you can kind of do 10 weeks of training sessions, and then you might then have a couple of weeks off and then resume that training program there. So I've kind of just moved through the sessions, and you're kind of concentrating, the first couple of weeks are on attack, then a week on defence, and then a week on specialist or strategy, and then back to 2 weeks of attack, to defence, and then to a strategy again. And then the last 2 weeks will probably be more that game sense, minor game sort of area that you would look at to work all those attacking and defensive skills to try to get them in combination and work them all together. So I've kind of gone through and just planned that through, and I'll just take this opportunity, if Greg can just scroll down just slightly down towards the strategies part. Yeah, just to there, because there was a question that came through around, do we, is it okay to put in systems and structures and strategies in an under 11 age group? And you can kind of see there's very basic outlines for centre pass attack, as well as centre pass defence. And they kind of come straight out of the Netball Australia framework. So it's great that there's a guideline there. But I think it's a really important age group to show them the basic structures of a centre pass, or even if that might be like a long court throw in or something like that. knowing that, and I think Jade and I are very similar in the way that we coach our athletes, right from juniors all the way through to elite, is that a lot of these strategies or setups and systems are starting positions, and you kind of have to then become familiar with, okay, if it doesn't go to that player, then what do I need to do? So teaching the players to think for themselves within that moment as well. Often what we call what-if moments, because it's not always going to be able to go to plan. And in a game of netball, you might do one system that works out the exact same way you've done it in training, maybe once or twice. So just knowing where to maybe start or what their time is to drive for the next ball is really important, but knowing that it's not always going to go through. So this is a bit of an example for you to say, okay, this is how I could kind of map out my program for a 10-week period, and then you would kind of, I would say, do very similar skills within the next 10 weeks after that school holiday break. But look at changing the activities up. So thinking about different drills or different activities that you might be able to do that still focus on those activities, because within 10 weeks, I think we would all be of the same opinion that this age group won't have mastered these skills within 10 weeks. So we're still focusing on those same skills, but delivering them in a different way to be able to continually build on their consistency on executing those skills. So it's something that you guys could play along with at home, and maybe even find out what, you know, is really specific to your team. You know, you might find that you really need to concentrate on more defence rather than attack. Me and Jade often talk around the times that you might spend on attack and times that you might spend on defence, particularly under 11s. I feel like so many times they can actually turn the ball over without actually intercepting the ball, just from like the opposition making a bad pass or their footwork or whatever the case may be. So sometimes the defence kind of looks after itself a little bit in under 11. So you might spend a little bit more time on attack. So we often say around 65% attack and 35% in defence. Is kind of a good way of kind of thinking about it. That might be a bit different for your team, but yeah, ultimately the way you win a game of netball is by shooting the ball through the hoop in your attacking end. So, and
just on that, when you do think about the game of netball and all the attacking skills compared to the defensive skills, there is actually quite a bit more involved in attack when you include the ball handling and the footwork, and then the general attacking movement and space awareness. You know, all those skills compared to the defensive skills, which is obviously still really important, I would say there's quite a bit more involved in attack. So that's probably also how we come up with that ratio a little bit.
Were there any questions around that program planning? I know that's very big picture for maybe a lot of you as coaches of under 11s, but I think it's a good idea of knowing what you do need to cover and then how that might look, rather than just going week to week to week and kind of just making that up as you go along. Were there any questions around that program planning? No? All right, so I think Jay's going to move on to start to look at our training session.
Yes, so if we start looking at training sessions for under 11s, it's probably the age group that we really have to look at the balance within the session. And I'll just, if we can share the PowerPoint so that you can look at that as we talk.
Sorry.
Yep, so page 4.
Let's just do this one, and then I'll skip through.
Cool. So, developing an effective training session. We always encourage you, when you are thinking about your training session, first of all, to go, right, what is my focus of this session, which we've obviously just chatted about with Guy, and what do I want to achieve? So rather than just saying, oh, we're going to work on chest passes or we're going to work on some footwork, what do you actually want to achieve out of the session? I think if you can be as specific as possible around that, rather than just practicing a particular skill, that will help you then go and develop the session and think about what activities do I need to run and deliver to make sure I can achieve that goal. Just to give you like a bit of an example around that, it might be that I want the players to have a really good understanding of passing placement, you know, which does involve chest passes or shoulder passes or whatever pass you might want to look to use. But by focusing on passing placement, hopefully by the end of the session, you can see improvement in where the players are passing it, and they actually have a better understanding of it. And you might question them at the end of the training and just say, okay, we've worked on this tonight, passing placement. What do you need to think about when you have the ball, like their vision, where the defenders are, how much space that player has when they're running and they want to throw them the ball. And obviously you need to prep them early on in the session and give them that information. But I find if we can be as specific as possible when we're coming up with that focus point, it really does help with your planning of that session. Which I just kind of talked about skill development in that first point underneath. So what to teach to achieve your individual and team goals. So obviously thinking about what Guy just chatted around the program plan and the season plan. Once you have that, then it's much easier to look at the skills, break them down and set some goals around, you know, whether you want to try and score 10 or 8 goals in a quarter. I mean, under 11s is quite young and you want to keep it fun and that, but you might even just set some goals around, we're not going to let the other teams score a certain amount of goals, or it could be even just as simple as being able to work that centre pass through all the way to the goal circle. You know, we're going to try and really focus on that. So then you've got to break down the skills that are involved with that type of goal. I also wanted to just touch on a question that came in from someone when they registered, and that was around the grouping of stronger players and weaker players. So there's probably not many under 11 teams that you come across that are all at the same level. There's such a variance in 9, 10, 11-year-olds, and it is one of the biggest challenges I think you would all have when you have 2 or 3 very good under 11 players versus some that may have never played before or just a little bit behind in their netball. So a couple of things we think about when it comes to that particular situation is, first of all, you want to improve the individual skills of every player, not just the weaker ones. So if we can come up with ways where the stronger players can continue to get stronger and the beginners or the weaker players can continue to improve as well, that's a great thing. And that might mean that there are times where you do have the stronger players working together and the weaker players working together. But by no means would we want you to do that every single session. It's a team game, so we want them to be really working well together and also realising the strengths and weaknesses of each other. So I would probably try and balance that a little bit around whether you put the stronger ones with the weaker ones or vice versa. So I'd mix it up as much as I can. And I know one thing Guy and I chatted about, especially after being in isolation and using Zoom a lot, was that we would think using Zoom to maybe do or give some homework to some of the players that need a bit of extra help. Maybe you could catch up with some of those players on Zoom and, you know, work on a couple of skills while they're at their house, whether it's footwork or whatever it might be. So I guess giving them a bit of homework to try and help them and, you know, lift them up to the level of some of the other players. So is there any other thoughts on that from you, just around?
Yeah, and I think, and you know, this might be a little bit controversial, but me and Jade were kind of talking about it around, particularly in a lot of, you know, the accreditation courses, they often talk to you about don't move on from a skill unless everybody can do it, you know, perform it correctly and perform it really well. And I think that's something that we've often always thought about as well. But in the context of it is that you're always learning and you're always developing that skill. I mean, even myself, when I go out and train, I'm still performing those skills and trying to make them as consistent as possible. So I think there is a time and place to be able to move on from an activity where you may need to progress it to make it a little bit more challenging, particularly for those more advanced players within your team. But know that maybe that might just push the ones that aren't quite there or aren't quite performing it consistently all the time to maybe, you know, that might just lift their execution of it. And to know that, okay, we've moved it on, they weren't 100% great at it, let's come back to it next week, or we know that we might need to refresh it. Like I said, at this age group, they're not going to be mastering these skills within a session. So knowing that you can move on without, you know, them being able to perform at 100%, I don't know that they'd all be consistently performing a skill 100% of the time at this age group. So I think it's okay to move on at times, but then go, okay, maybe it is too hard, I need to regress it back slightly. So I think that was something else that we kind of thought about as well in terms of extending the advanced players while still working with the younger ones or the ones that aren't as advanced.
And just on that note, just remember, like, you're not perfect, we're not perfect, and the one thing I come back to is that I want to try and help everyone improve. So if you try something and it doesn't really work, or, you know, a player struggles with it, that's okay. I've definitely run a session before and gone, oh, that didn't really work, but I learned from it. And then the next session I ran was really good because I tried to do it in a different way and it worked much better. So never be afraid to make mistakes. You're in a role where you have to manage lots of different things and lots of different abilities. And I think just keeping that in mind and knowing that you're there to try and help everyone, not just the weaker players, not just the stronger players, is really important to fall back on. Another thing that came up, and it's listed up here on the PowerPoint, is just fun and engagement. And how, I think every second person said, how do you engage under 11 players? And look, it is tough. I don't think there's anyone out there that's probably able to do it perfectly 100% of the time. We do work with that age group quite a bit in our school program. So we've been able to come up with probably lots of creative ways to try and keep their attention. So just to give you a few examples, it says there on the list anyway, but using game sense activities is a really useful tool, which often this age group love doing because it brings out that competitive side, and it also allows them to, you know, really try and master a game or win a game, but also work on skills at the same time. So we will often use game sense activities, not just at the end of a training session, but sometimes in the middle of a session, or if we've worked on a particular skill for 10, 15 minutes, we might then just go into a game sense activity straight away. To keep it fun, keep them moving, but also see if they can start implementing some of what we're working on in that activity. So a few other little tips that I often use when I'm trying to keep the attention. So I often do little challenges midway through my training session. So if I'm working with a group for probably 45 minutes or an hour, once we've had a drink break after doing a particular activity, I will often say, okay, everyone come and stand in a circle and we're going to do a bit of an activity. And, you know, you might say, you've all got to strike a pose, a netball pose, just to get them going, oh, okay, what's a netball pose? And then once I've done that, okay, now we're going to go out into the activity. So I try and come up with different little things that we can do to just get their attention before we go into the skill development. And you might also think about, especially with under 11s, we find friends like to stay together, or the same two will always work together and they stay in their little group. So just another tip on making sure they can work with everyone and also be engaged is something I do all the time is find someone that's got similar kind of shoes to you or same colour shoes as you, or find the person that's closest to your birth date. Obviously the aim is that they are finding different people all the time and not the same person, but just little things like that, keep it fun, keep them engaged. You know, a lot of that isn't really netball related, but at this age, we really just want them to enjoy it and walk away from sessions going, oh my gosh, that was so hard. Or, you know, we spent 35 minutes working on an outside pivot. You know, that's probably not the the aim at the moment. We want to make sure they're coming away having a really, fun time and learning as well. So I'll just touch on that last point that's up on the screen. So
Sorry, just before you do that, something's just popped into my head in terms of that fun and engagement stuff is when Jade said, little mini challenges, maybe with this time that they've all used their TikTok is very popular with some of this age group, is maybe they learn a TikTok and they have to perfect it as a team or something like that. When you start to lose them, that might just pull them back in. Okay, we've learned that, we've had a little practice, let's get back to our netball, something like that, just to keep them kind of switched on. And it's probably something, a good thing to come out of this maybe.
Yep. Switched us on when we had to do our jobs. Yes. We'll go on to that next point just around when you are developing your training session, the skill development's important, the fun and the engagement's important, and then generally you are going to think about what happened in the last game and what do we need to work on, which at the moment isn't really relevant and may not be for a little while yet, but that's definitely a really important consideration when you are looking to develop your training session. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
All right, so Jade's kind of talked about things that maybe will help to make that training session as effective as it can and keeping the athletes and players engaged. So what does it actually will look like? So you're looking at what your focus of the session will be, and now we kind of need to structure what that session will look like. So we've just kind of put a couple of little dot points down there around the group organisation. Again, that can come back to, is it the more advanced players working together in a small group for a portion of it and then coming back into the larger group as a whole? How the activities flow so that you can maximise your time within the training session. I'm sure a lot of you will only have 45 to an hour for your training session, and we all know that that doesn't go for very long. It can go really quickly. So making sure that those activities can really flow from one to the other, so you're not wasting time by setting up all these different cones and then having to get rid of them all and then setting up a whole another lot of cones. And a really simple way that we run our sessions is that the players are then responsible for collecting all the equipment and then putting it off to the side, rather than them going and getting a drink and the coach having to pick up everything, because make them responsible for getting all the equipment out and getting it back as well. So something really simple like that can really help. What your warm-up is going to look like, and I think this is a great way of providing structure straight into the session, particularly for this age group. And that might then, a quick little 5-minute warm-up for this age group using some of the need program exercises, and then going into a bit of a fun game. And that, might be every week it changes. Some weeks it might be the same little fun game, just so that they're prepared and ready and smiling at the start of the session. I think is always really great to be jumping into a session. What your skill development, so progressing your skills through in a progressive way, and then like we've said there, just making sure that we regularly revise those skills. So that's where that program planning comes into effect as well. And then using our game sense activities or our modified match play towards the end. And I'm sure once everybody gets back into training as a full, they're going to want to get back into full netball mode straight away. So knowing how we can maybe implement that without going straight into a whole session of games or match play is a really great idea. And then looking at your debrief and cool down activities. So I might just bring up quickly our, I've done a bit of a sample training plan just so that you can kind of have a little look at what's involved in that and kind of timing. So this is based off a 1-hour training session. And I always say, to make sure that when you're planning a 1-hour training session, don't plan for every single minute, because there's times where players will be off getting drinks, or you'll need to spend a little bit more time, giving feedback or explaining the activity. So this is just using one of our templates that we have within our training plan. So just looking at what the skill focus is, so a straight lead, outside pivot and pass selection. So this is based off our week 2 of the program plan, what equipment you might need, what the warm-up will look like, and we'll actually have done a little bit of a video. It's just me doing the movements. There's no other team for me to coach or work with at the moment, so it's just me doing the movements, but we'll have a little look at that video and then you can see that activity run. We'll scroll down to the skill development section. So we're now looking at our outside pivot. So we've got a team of 9 players, and this is where you might separate the ones that are a little bit stronger. They might work together, and you know, they're just going to be performing the skill with equipment to start off with, just performing the skill with a cone. 5 minutes. Again, you might have to spend a little bit longer on that. We'll scroll down to the next, we'll scroll up, I should say, back down. Yeah. So the next step is to add the ball in. So you would just add the ball into that, that skill. You might spend about 5 or 10 minutes on that, depending on now that we have to actually coach the catching, passing, what type of pass they're going to do, where they're going to pass the ball. So just allowing that little extra time to work on that. Moving through into our minor game or modified match play. And just looking at then a decision making, so looking at our pass selection. So there's, you know, a thrower, we've got 2 leads that are going to drive out to different lengths. So one's going to be a short option, one's going to be a longer option, and it's about the thrower making the decision. So there's lots more things coming into play within this activity. So you're probably now starting to spend a little bit more time on stopping the activity and then starting to coach and provide more detailed specific feedback. So allowing just that little extra time. And then you could add a defender into this activity as well as you go through. Again, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time tonight on actually looking at a training session. So we'll just scroll up to the last page.
Sorry.
And then just, you know, really easy game is numbers netball. So, you know, with a focus on making sure that they're working on their outside pivot and they're picking the right pass to do. And, you know, looking at that, there's 9 players. So just making sure that, you know, you work out that 1 and 5 or 1 and 4 are the same person. So yeah, just a really quick way of looking at how you can then structure that session. And what kind of goes into that. So, and then just the cool down and debrief. And something that I think is really important to always review the session at the end with the players. So you get them into the circle, do a bit of their stretching and recovery, and just ask them what worked really well in this session. What did we do well? And then hopefully they're starting to use some of the coaching points within that. And then also ask about what could we improve it. Maybe they trained really, really well. So it might be just one of the skills that need to become a little bit more consistent. They did it really well, but not all the time. This is also sometimes when you might have to bring in some of those behavioural things as well. Maybe we didn't really listen super well in this session, so we've got to make sure that we bring our best listening into the next training session. Or maybe I didn't talk to one of the players that were in the team, so maybe I need to make sure that we're talking to everybody within that team within the session. So just something like that, so it's not always on-court skill-based. So you'll get to just have a quick little look. We often get a question around what are some of the best, you know, ways to warm up this age group where rather than, and we often see it when we go out and work with this, you know, clubs or teams, and they just send them on a lap and of the courts, and then they might do a couple of bit of stretching. Look, it's a great way of getting them to warm up and for you maybe to just go, okay, what's the session going to be today? But the amount of times I have seen kids falling over because they're trying to, you know, be really competitive and beat somebody to the to get back to the start, or maybe collide with another team that's doing it, or collide with a team that's already training. So I think it's a great way of structuring a session is to get everybody into a circle. Talk about, you know, the last game that we maybe just played. Talk about the things that we've just done. You know, just do a really quick recap on it. things that work well, things that maybe we need to keep working on, and then talk about what the session focus is going to be, and then let's get into our warm-up. So, and that's all conducted within a little circle. So I'm going to get Greg to just share the video. It goes for about 2 minutes 50, so it might be a nice little change from not hearing our voices for the whole time. And you'll just get to see, look, it's a really simple, so we might just pause it before it goes. So just in a, this is a little netball court down the road, but it's not full size. So you might set this up kind of in the middle of a half a court, if you have half a court to train on. And it's just a ring of cones, and each player will be standing on a cone to begin with, and then that way they're ready to go.
Can everyone see that? Thumbs up if you can see that.
Yeah. So that's just in the middle of the court. So each player will be moving out to the sidelines or towards the goal line or towards the halfway. And you're just going to work through some running, some movement, some dynamic stretches, some landings. And it's all going to be based on your time that you want them to do. It might be, you might get them to do each activity for 30 seconds. You might get them to do just a number of them. So I'll just show you quickly the activities that we kind of went through. So everybody would jog out together, jog in, jog out, and jog back into the middle again. So they would just keep doing that for a certain amount of time. Just a knee to chest, which will help to stretch through their glutes and hips. And then back to running, and then we're going to do high knees, which is the more dynamic version of knees to chest. And this is kind of how I've structured the warm-up, is it's a bit more of a static stretch to then getting into a dynamic movement of it. So quad stretch for a couple on each side. Again, they might hold it for a little bit longer as they're going, and then we'll get into the dynamic side of it. So jogging out all together, and then doing their heel kicks back into the middle, jogging out all together, and then heel kicks back into the middle again. So just hamstring scoops. That's a bit more of the static stretch of it. And then you would move into the dynamic, which will be high kicks out of the circle, and then coming in and doing the same thing again. And again, they don't have to go super, super far, and you're keeping them quite contained for this age group as well. Into a groin stretch from side to side, and then just a little squat in the middle. And then the dynamic movement for our groins, we'll just go into our side step, working both sides. And then we're just going to go in through our landing. So just our double foot landing. So jumping up from 2 feet, nice soft landings, feet shoulder width apart. I think I do 4 here, and then go into your single leg. So this is a bit more of that knee activation kind of work. And as a coach, you could just be on the sideline or in the middle of the circle, just calling out these as they're going. And then into a bit more of a dynamic warm up. So fast feet, to sprint out. Then I did fast feet facing into the middle, and then on go they would turn and run out. Fast feet facing out, and then on go they're going to jump, land, and then sprint. And then the last one facing into the middle, fast feet, on go, jump, land, and then turn and run out. So really quick but effective way of warming up. You then might, I'm doing my elbow touches and knee touches and all that sort of stuff. So you might then, that's a really quick way of warming up, go into a quick little fun game, and then we're bang into the session. So great way of just getting that organisation, which I think the under 11s really crave. And as coaches, then you know they're prepared and ready to get into that training session. The last little point, we don't necessarily have to bring up the PowerPoint presentation. It's nice to see everybody's faces for a little bit as we go through, is in terms of a training session, it's really about, as coaches, we need to know our players and our athletes that we're coaching to know how to get the best out of them in a training environment. And I think that really comes back to understanding what type of learners they are. And I'm sure if there's a few teachers that are with us today, that's really important to know what kind of learning style our players are, whether they're visual learners or whether they're players that need to see or feel it first, like walking through the movements and then realising what it is. Maybe they need to see it in a video clip before they go out and do it. Maybe they need to practice it a few times before going out and doing it. So just knowing what your player's learning style is really key to getting the best out of them in a training environment, and knowing that they're not all going to learn the same. So you might have to adjust your coaching style at times to be able to get the most out of everybody within the team. Also, how to give them feedback. I know there's quite a lot of players out there, particularly that might be a little bit more shy or reserved, that don't like that feedback kind of being presented to them in a big group environment. So you may need to think about how you are going to provide that feedback to them in more one-on-one sort of setting within the training environment. So it's not so it is in real life or real time. So, you know, it might be just a quick little chat on the sideline, or get them to come over and have a look at it, and you can give them the coaching points as they go. So making sure that you understand how they like to receive feedback. And even in under 11, some of them will want you to be yelling and screaming at them if they're getting it right or wrong. And then there's others that maybe need a bit more of a softer touch. So just understanding that. And sometimes, you know, having a chat to their parents and finding out how they, you know, work best with their child is often a good way of getting an idea, particularly those that maybe have some learning difficulties and that sort of stuff as well. And then lastly, just making sure that we're using that praise within the session, and, you know, celebrate when they do something really well. I think that's something that myself and Jade are really big on, is that when we see our players, even in the under 11s, perform something great, or even if it's our, you know, championship V&L team, if they do something really well, celebrate it. You know, not now with social distancing, but, you know, getting in there with a high five with them, or really, you know, getting up and about if they perform a skill really well, particularly if they do it for the first time, I think is really important within that training environment. It just helps to bring that energy and know that, you know, you're seeing that they're doing a really good job. Does anybody have any questions around developing an effective training session? I know we've gone through a lot of information within that, and but if there's any questions, happy for you to unmute yourself and ask, or type it in. No? All right. So we might bring up the next page in our slide. We're moving on to our
That's okay.
Yeah. So we're moving into our Matchday coaching. So look, we've done quite a bit of mentoring within this age group. So I know how different a match day for an under 11s can look compared to, particularly if you look at it compared to a Suncorp, where they get 5-minute quarter time, 10 minutes or 15 minutes at half time, and then 5 minutes at three-quarter time. So there's heaps of time to be able to analyse it, discuss what needs to keep working and all that sort of stuff. So we don't have a lot of time in under 11s to be able to pick up everything that they're doing well and pick up everything that maybe they aren't and that we need to fix. And we probably don't have a lot of time to be able to fix it on game day. So I think it's really important to have a great structure to a game day so that everybody knows where they're meant to be, when they're meant to be there, and what's happening. So the first little thing that I've put up there is rotations. And I'm sure that there's probably lots of different policies that associations or teams or clubs have around rotations at this age group, because we've worked with a lot of teams that have to enforce a rotation policy around players that need to play across lots of different positions, and often they have to have a certain amount of time within each position on the court. What's the best way of doing that? Well, I've got some ideas, and I'll share those with you, just around what I would probably do if I was coaching under 11s. And this might not fit everybody because you may have different rules or policies that are in place from your club. So I'll get Greg maybe to stop sharing this page and just share this quick little Excel spreadsheet that I kind of developed. And
hang on, I've just got to close that.
It will just go through the player rotation. So I was kind of thinking about it and what I would kind of do, and I've actually gone on the basis that you might have, and this is based off if you had 9 players. If you had 10, then that's okay as well. But each, you're just going to group the 3 players that are going to work through goals for 2 weeks. 3 players that are going to work through the mid-court for 3 weeks, and 3 players that are going to work through the circle defence for 2 weeks in a row. So you can kind of see the players 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 through that. And that way you can kind of track how many quarters they've played as well. So player 1 played 3 quarters in goal attack or goal shooter in week 1. I would then keep them in that same combinations for week 2, so that they get another opportunity straight away to maybe focus on some of the things that as a coach we ask them to concentrate on or improve on. And the same for, you might have asked your goalers, we really want you to maybe work on your refeeds to try to get a little bit closer to the post. They might not get that opportunity to do it again for another 3 or 4 weeks. So they know they've got another opportunity to do it next week. It also, I feel like, helps with a player that might have called in sick on that day, and it was their turn to play in goals, and rather than having to flip all your rotations around again, they've got another opportunity next week to get out there and play that position. So just a good way of rotating through those positions. Plus, they also then get to spend maybe the first 6 weeks of being in combination with those same players, so those same players in the attack end or the defence end, and it will help to keep a bit of consistency with who they're passing the ball to, and how am I going to pass the ball to that player, or even talking to each other out on court. We'll keep a little bit of consistency for the first 6 rounds, and then you could then change the order of who they're working with. So rather than player 1, 2 and 3 working together, maybe it's player 1, 9 and 5 that are working together for that next 6 weeks. So look, I'll get Greg to scroll down. There's within this spreadsheet, there's the first 6 rounds, which shows the player progressions. I haven't filled that all out, but this is one of the documents that we will be able to share with you, so you can go away and put that in for yourself to try to work through as well. So a good little way of rotating those players through those positions.
Just on it too.
Can I just ask?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
Just with you. Sorry, just what worries me with the under 11s, especially the new players, is if they're only doing 1 quarter, they just get so confused if they're only in a position for 1 quarter, some of them.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of came up with this strategy a little bit.
Staying in the same area, yeah.
Yeah, so they're across the same area, so you don't necessarily have to give them, like I've seen teams that have had somebody play for 4 quarters and they're playing goal shooter for a quarter, centre for the next quarter, goalkeeper, and then goal defence. And I'm thinking this player, one, might not even know where they're meant to go in each of those positions if they're quite new to netball. So you don't have to give them too much information to think about, and you can keep it really simple for them. So I feel like this strategy might be a good way of introducing it. For the first part of it, you might then adapt it and change it as the season goes through, but it's a good way of starting out, I think. Yeah, because I think you make a good point, Karen, around a player that has to play 3 different positions in a game could be quite confusing for them. Jade, you
That's kind of what I was going to talk about. So,
cool.
Cameron, you stole my thunder, but that's good.
Any other questions around rotations? Any other things that people have that maybe popped up that they've gone, oh, I've come up with a really great strategy to work that through? No? All right, so we might stop that share and head back to our PowerPoint presentation. So the next thing we're going to look at is, look, I think we've got to be really realistic, is that often we also need to engage parents and the people that are bringing their children to sport. So making sure that we're really open with our communication and around the times that they need to be there. I know it's so frustrating as a coach when everybody's there 20 minutes before the game and, you know, you've got 4 players that rock up, you know, 5 minutes before the game, and it's just, you know, throws the whole kind of time out. So really communicating this really early is really important. So just things to kind of provide to the parents and players is, you know, arrival time. I've just put there maybe 10 minutes prior to the warm-up so that, you know, they can all do their hugs and catch up and talk non-stop and get all that out of the way. And then 20 minutes before the game, that's when, you know, they've got to switch on and start thinking about the game as much as we can kind of keep them. The warm-up, you might then go through what are some of the pre-game focuses, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail for 5 minutes. 5 minutes and just doing that kind of, and you might keep it very similar to your training environment warm-up that we just saw. A quick little ball handling skills, and that might be in pairs, or it might be like a, you know, a line drill where they're just starting to get the ball into their hands a little bit, and then a quick little dynamic activity. And that even could be like a little fun challenge or something like that that Jade was talking about before, just so that they're, you know, going out on court in a nice, fun and, you know, enjoyable way, rather than all the stresses of what needs to happen out on the court.
Can I just jump in there and just point out, I know when we've worked with under 11 groups before, often they don't really warm up or don't allow time for that. And we definitely understand that this age group, you know, I remember when I was young and I never warmed up, I just went and played all the time. And yes, I guess you can get away with that when you're at this age. But at the same time, we want to try and create really good habits and ensure that our players know that this is really important for your well-being and obviously your safety, ensuring that your body's ready to go. And I would really encourage you to prioritise this as much as you can where possible, so that when they go into under 13s and then go into under 15s, you know, they realise that the warm-up is a very important part of their match day plan. So I just felt it was important to say, because we have gone out quite a few times and gone, oh, there's no warm-up, with under 11s especially. So
yeah, and look, you don't need a huge amount of room. That little warm-up that you saw on the video doesn't really have a huge amount of room. It just, you could adapt it to be, you know, running on the spot rather than running back and forth. So, you know, you don't need a whole lot of room, because I know in big associations you probably don't have a heap of room to warm up away from the court. So, yeah, just something, you know, looking at the long-term development of a player is to start to introduce this stuff slowly as we go. Then looking what goes into a pre-game focus, and particularly for this age group, you don't want to make it very technical. You know, you want to keep it as short and concise as possible. So 1 or 2 points around attack, 1 or 2 points around defence, and that might even reflect something that you've just done at the previous training session. And you might just present that. I've just kind of put that off to the side in that little picture around what those might be. And that's kind of based off the program plan that we kind of put out there. And then I've just put down that second dot point is the team to begin lineup. Now, I really love using this phrase rather than a starting 7, because even for this age group, they all know, oh, I want to be in that starting 7. I need to be in that starting 7. They'll already understand a little bit of that kind of mentality. and particularly for under 11s, the team that starts the game is probably not going to be the same team that finishes the game. So I always like to talk about, even at the elite level that I coach, is that it's the team to begin, because that team that begins may not be the team that finishes out the game as well, particularly if you've got lots of depth or whatever in the team. So it's just a nice phrase that I like to use to get away from that starting 7 mentality. And then it can include, it doesn't necessarily have to, that would be my baseline, but you might know your opposition a little bit and know a little bit of what they do, or they might have a dominant player that you might have to really work hard to try to cover. But just remember that it might take a little bit away from your own team's performance and their own confidence. So just really focus, I would say, majority of the time on what you want your team to do at this age group. Like I said, you might then have to think about some of the things that we've just worked on in our last training session, or if it's the second time of them playing in that position from our rotations, is maybe remind them, we really wanted you to work on this thing or this skill within the game. And that kind of comes back into that individual focus. And that individual focus might be that we just want you to smile when you're out on court, or we want you to, give your partner a high five or a toe tap because they've done something really great. Or if they've dropped the ball, tell them that, we want to, don't worry about it, let's get the next one, something like that. So, just a nice introduction into our Matchday coaching. Next slide, please, Greg. So coaching from the sideline, and this is probably something that I've really developed over the years, as I used to be one of those coaches that, coached and yelled at every single pass and watched every single pass, and it probably wasn't the best use of my time. I was so invested in the game, but watch the whole game and make some quick little notes as you're going, I think is really important. And we've worked with a lot of coaches that sometimes they're just so drilled into all the rotations that need to happen and making sure that everybody's in the right place at the right time, is that they lose the overview of what they actually should be doing within the game, and looking at what they're doing well, and then looking at what are some of the things that we need to improve on. And I think the biggest thing for this age group is look at what they are doing well, so that when they come off at quarter time or half time or quarter time, we can give them something that they're all doing really, really well as a team. And I think we're always so quick to go to what needs to improve or what do we need to keep working on. Let's start with those positive messages so that they come off feeling really great. I've said limit calling out because I know we are all going to be doing that at times throughout the game. So just make sure that if you are doing that, use your cue words so that you're not having this massive, big, long conversation from the sideline with the player, which kind of distracts them a little bit from the game. And if there's a quick turnover, it comes back down the other end, they stop talking to you. Plus, I also feel like it loses it distracts other players as well. If you're having a big long conversation with one player, then the other players kind of go, oh, what's going on over there? And they lose their distraction as well. So it also allows them to make decisions on the court. Ultimately, as they go through their netball, is we can't actually get out on court with them as coaches and hold their hands through it. So we want them to be able to make those decisions on their own. And like I said, praise that good play and, make sure that we're getting all of our parents on board with that as well. As a little side note that I've thought around coaching from the sidelines is that most of the parents would probably think that they're coaches at some stage as well. So just having that discussion with your parents is maybe if they can kind of mimic the same cue words that you're using as a coach is a really good idea, so that everybody's giving them some consistency. And again, I would really promote them to use their positive praise around good play rather than negative stuff that's going out. I might just quickly jump out of the PowerPoint and just around that communication during the breaks. I know that often it's a quick straight change at quarter time or 3/4 time, or you might have like a quick minute or so. So something that I've used a couple of times when I've been out mentoring, and some advice that I've given is to use our pre-game focuses, and I'm going to stand up and just move this a little bit closer to the camera, is just on a little whiteboard, is I've just put down all the pre-game focuses. So using a little whiteboard or a big whiteboard or something like that, just writing out your pre-game focuses, so that at quarter time, all you have to do is get a different coloured texter. I'm going to coach in the moment and change, or I'm going to stand so that you can kind of see it. Changing direction really strongly, you might give it a big tick so that they can, it's a visual cue, you know, well done, or you might do a smiley face and well done everybody, we did great with our change of direction. Maybe we've got a bit of a sad face because we didn't really communicate our centre passes really well, and we just did the same thing over and over and over again. But our hands over pressure was really great, so we're going to give that a big tick. And then, you know, at times we had our centre come back and do a double defence of our of the dominant player, so we're going to give that a happy face as well. So just using that as a strategy, so that you know, you don't have to spend 2 minutes when you don't have 2 minutes trying to get those points across, I think is really key. So just something like a little whiteboard is really easy to do. It might even just be like your notepad, and you can just hold your notepad up and write it on there as well, and just show them that you're giving it a big tick as well. So just a little strategy that might you guys might try it in your own club environment. All right, the last little bit that we were going to talk about, and I'll get Greg, you're doing a very good job, Greg, with your flicking from the screens. It's just moving into our post-game address of the team, and I know probably some of you as coaches have experienced players having to just run off straight away off to another sporting commitment or off to a sibling sporting commitment straight away after the game. And that's okay. If you can maybe get your team together for a quick 5-minute debrief after the game, I think that's really important. So just a couple of little notes on that is, and this is a learned experience, is to try to keep the recovery food, the fruit and lollies, just wait until you've had a quick little chat, because otherwise they lose all concentration. So, you know, if parents are coming in and giving out all their, you know, drink bottles and drinks, and particularly the lollies, is maybe just ask those to be held off for just a little second while you have a quick little chat. And I thought it was a good opportunity just to talk about the sandwich technique. So thinking about our positive is, what did the team do really well? And you want to make sure that you're really specific around that. What's the one thing that we want to make sure that we keep working on as a team to improve on? And then the follow-up positive of that is, how are we going to improve on that for the next game or into our next training session? So that's just that sandwich technique for providing positive feedback. So any questions through our Matchday coaching? Any tips or hints that you guys have out there that you want to share with the group, or anything that we haven't covered that you've had a question around that you've really struggled with? Nope, all the silence sounds like we're covering everything off pretty well.
We'll take it as a good sign.
Yeah. So I might hand the reins back over, because you're probably sick of listening to my voice at the moment. Over to Jade to finish us off.
Yep, so next slide. So just to finish off, because as we said, engaging your players was the biggest question, or the most popular question we had when looking at all of your registrations. So number one for this age group is definitely make it fun. So, you know, we want to keep players in netball. We don't want them to play a season and then go play something else. So that's definitely got to be a priority. And just remember, like, fun isn't always just a fun game. It can be, as it says there, you know, achieving goals, like that's pretty fun as well. Receiving recognition. So when they are doing something well, or it might have taken them a little bit to get, but really making sure they know from us that that was such a great job that they got it. Mastering skills, and then participating in competition. Like, ultimately everyone wants to get out there, do their best, hopefully win. So winning is fun, as we say too. Recognise achievement. So celebrate when a player performs a skill correctly or well, which we've already talked about. But I also felt it was important to say, and I know this is something we've introduced in a lot of our programs, is at the beginning of a session, maybe you could say to anyone, has anyone got anything they want to share with the group? Like you won first place in the swimming carnival at school, or it's my birthday tomorrow, or it could be anything. But I think just also getting to learn what your players are like, and it gives you an insight into them. But it also allows them to be kind of proud and to let the group know this is what's happening in my life, get to know each other a bit more, but really say well done when they've done something amazing that might not be netball, it could just be in their general life. Provide challenges, as we've already spoken about. So, yeah, never underestimate how you can motivate your players and what that can achieve when they have to work towards something, or they've got to get this many points to be able to, you know, finish training or win the game. It's actually a really important thing or tool to remember for this age group. Developing an inclusive environment. So as it says there, provide opportunities and challenges to ensure players work with different teammates, which we've chatted about. And then as it says there, which we mentioned before, you know, in this activity, you're going to work with someone that's got the same kind of shoes. So we really just want to make sure they're all interacting with each other, not just the same person all the time. And finally, this was something I felt was important when I was thinking about under 11 teams and players. Failing to plan is planning to fail. And I guess one of our biggest bits of advice that we can give you is you can't really over-plan. And, you know, under 11 netball, I would say, is one of the most important age groups, because you are setting up those foundations. And I don't know how many times we go out and work with a team that's under 13s, 15s, 17s, even open. And unfortunately, some of these players haven't been taught correctly, or they've developed habits in the wrong way, and it is really difficult to change those and break those. And I guess from our perspective, don't be afraid to plan. You know, under 11s, yes, it's fun and we want for them to enjoy their netball, but planning, organising, making sure, like we've already pointed out with the overall program plan for the season, you know, have a go at that. Your players will benefit so much if you can be organised and really go out there for that 45 minutes and know exactly what you want to achieve. So, you know, I think if you take your role or place a lot of importance on your role, then your players probably will as well. So that's probably my biggest piece of advice. And you know, I think you are all amazing for taking on under 11s. We know what it's like, so good on you. But yeah, I definitely encourage you to go out and really try and just plan as much as you can, because you will be so impressed with what your players can give you. A little bit over time.
Yeah.
But I guess, yeah, that was kind of where we were going to finish up. As we said earlier, we weren't really able to touch on a lot of specific skills tonight, so we just thought we'd point out a lot of the workshops that we do and hopefully can do, maybe in like a month's time or sooner. We'll have to wait and see. But if there is anything that you, particularly from tonight, you're like, oh, I really need to brush up on a particular skill, or even your club might be interested in running any of these sessions, you know, that's what we love doing. We love helping you all upskill and be able to then pass it on to your players. So I won't go through all that list now, but that basically covers all the skills within netball. So can we put it back onto so we can see everyone's faces? So we have gone over to but we just really wanted you to all walk away from tonight's session feeling inspired, pardon the pun, but just feeling like you've picked up a couple of things that you can implement into your coaching. You're all different, don't lose your flavour. You know, Guy and I are different, we have similarities, but be you, just always be thinking about, you know, how can you help your players improve. So is there, and thank you, Olga, for the whiteboard comment. That's really good feedback. Is there any questions from anyone about anything? We don't want to keep you too long, but happy to kind of open it up if anyone has anything. No, I definitely think we take that as a good sign. Yeah. We did go, oh, I wonder how many questions we're going to get. I think under 11s, there's always lots. So look, thank you very much for joining us. It's great that you have just committed the last hour and a little bit to, you know, developing your coaching. So hopefully we get to see you all soon and work with you, but we really appreciate you logging in and spending the time with us. So thank you.
Thank you.